This is a place where angels and mortals meet. This is a place where the past and present intermingle. This is a place where the beauty of nature exposes the landscape of memory. This is historic Oakdale Cemetery in Wilmington, North Carolina. Buried beneath these grand wrought iron gates are heroes and villains, lions and lambs, politicians and paupers. Beneath the azalea blooms, magnolia blossoms, and towering oak trees lie the mortal remains of more than 30,000 people, all of whom have a story to tell, all now intricately woven into the forested tapestry of Oakdale. Almost as much a park as a cemetery, the landmark's winding paths, enchanting flora, and garden-like atmosphere vividly reflect the mid-19th century rural cemetery movement. Founders established memorial parks on the outskirts of towns and cities to ease the overflow of burials in urban graveyards and family plots, and to provide better protection from communicable airborne diseases. Romantic English gardens heavily influenced designers of American rural cemeteries, who desired to create naturalistic final resting places in a pastoral landscape. They wanted families to commune with their ancestors while convening in nature. With its gentle hills, shady pathways, and abundant foliage, Oakdale is an excellent example of the idyllic, picturesque cemetery. One observer noted in 1911, the grounds of Oakdale almost seem to have been molded especially for its ultimate purpose. In 1852, North Carolina's General Assembly granted a charter to the proprietors of Oakdale Cemetery, comprised of prominent Wilmington citizens, headed by Dr. John Armand de Rosette, who wanted to open a new burial ground on the outskirts of town. Upon incorporation, the group purchased a 45-acre tract along Burnt Mill Creek, roughly half a mile from the downtown district. In 1855, the company sold the first lots at public auction, garnering a minimum of $50 apiece for spaces that would accommodate the remains of up to 12 people. That same year, Wilmington's Board of Aldermen passed an ordinance banning interments inside the town limits, a common practice since colonial days. Inadvertent or not, the new law helped bolster the sale of Oakdale's burial plots. In early February 1855, the cemetery received its first interment, 6-year-old Annie de Rosette, the youngest daughter of the Cemetery Corporation's president. Her simple marble marker, featuring a reposing lamb, set an early precedent for symbolically carved gravestones, memorials, and monuments that helped define Oakdale's historical significance. Oakdale emerged in part from the grave concerns of health officials that urban burial grounds were contaminated with sicknesses of the dead that could spread to the living. In the days before doctors grasped the concept of germs, bacteria, and viruses, they believed decomposing matter, including human remains, was a major source of diseases. To alleviate the spread of contagions, authorities opted to locate new cemeteries away from inner cities. The change coincided with the Romantic movement of 19th century Europe that celebrated the human connection to nature. American landscape architects designed rural cemeteries to resemble English parkland gardens, with the natural landscape left largely intact. Oakdale's planner, Wilmington's town surveyor Louis C. Turner, laid out 8 sizable interment areas, connected by a labyrinth of depressed paths pushed through a gently rolling savanna, dotted with scrawny pines and blackjack oaks. Low cement retaining walls and cast iron benches on family plots reinforced the concept that cemeteries were parks where visitors could relax and enjoy nature in all its glory, while communing with deceased family and friends. Wilmington residents also strolled, socialized, and picnicked beneath Oakdale's resplendent foliage. Rufus Bunnell, a Connecticut-born architectural draftsman who lived and worked in Wilmington from 1859 to 1860, described one of his frequent visits.
I took a drive out to Oakdale Cemetery about tea time, a cemetery laid out right in the pine forest, but with a good number of oaks and pretty underbrush among the oaks. An attractive stream bordered the woods on one side. I saw the place had great possibilities, and I afterward made a sketch of the back entrance across a rustic bridge over a stream.
On another excursion to Oakdale, Bunnell wrote with astonishment that Oakdale could be so beautiful, even in December.
The foliage was beautifully fresh, and numbers of various kinds of birds were singing and flitting about among the branches of the forest-like place. What a contrast to some northern cemetery on a day so late in the year.
As nature generally defines Oakdale's beauty, the statues, memorials, and monuments represent the lives of more than 30,000 people. Splendid marble sculptures bearing poignant epitaphs, some ornately inscribed, and vibrant stained glass windows and heavy iron doors of massive mausoleums contrast with the mostly simple granite and sandstone grave markers embossed with simple wording. Soon after the company began selling burial lots, Wilmington's Hebrew community purchased a tract for a cemetery within the larger cemetery. Rabbi Isaac Lazer traveled from Philadelphia to dedicate the Beit Chaim, or Garden of Life, in 1855. Local fraternal organizations, including the Masons, the Independent Order of Oddfellows, and the Improved Order of the Red Men, also established individual interment grounds for members. Relocating bodies from local burial grounds to Oakdale occurred regularly, especially from the graveyard at St. James Episcopal Church, small urban plots, and Cape Fear plantations. Headstones and grave markers were also moved, a few etched with birth and death dates going back to the late 1790s, more than half a century before Oakdale opened its gate. While the details of most burial services have been lost in time, one much publicized funeral for General Lewis Marsteller of the North Carolina State Militia in 1860 revealed the traditions of the day. Rufus Bunnell described the somber and then animated occasion in his private journal.
First came through the gateway the Freemasons with their band playing a dead march, then the military companies, and then a double carriage containing the ministers following the hearse. Directly after, there came on foot all the house servants, the slaves who had belonged to the dead man, and lastly, a long line of carriages filled with persons of more or less note. The solemn music, the muffled drums, and the long procession was quite impressive. At the end of all the ceremonies, the soldiers fired volleys over the grave. So ended that part of the occasion. But as the procession left the ground, the liveliest kind of band music struck up, and the whole thing took on a great holiday air. Staid old Wilmington of quiet Sundays was broken into a great holiday. Said blunt old Captain Hallett, as we were afterward assembled on the front piazza, "Too much flumgummery. I don't want to be buried that way."
The Oakdale Cemetery Company assigned the majority of the property for privately owned burial plots, but set aside some areas for public use. One sizable grassy knoll holds the remains of approximately 400 victims of a yellow fever epidemic that devastated Wilmington in the autumn of 1862. As the nation plunged deeper into the second year of the Civil War, Wilmington was becoming one of the South's major seaports. A Confederate commerce steamer named the Kate out of Nassau unknowingly imported yellow fever, along with its vital cargo of military supplies, through the U.S. Navy's blockade of Wilmington on August 5th. By late September, doctors reluctantly announced that cases of yellow fever sweeping through town had reached epidemic proportions. During the following 3 months, the deadly disease claimed the lives of 7% of the town's population of 10,000 people. 12-year-old John D. Bellamy Jr. witnessed its ghastly effects.
I stood at our home on Market and Fifth Streets, watching wagon loads of corpses go by to Oakdale Cemetery.
Most wealthy white families fled the city to escape the pestilence, seeking refuge in safer environs along local sounds or towns and cities away from the coast. Working-class whites and enslaved African Americans bore the brunt of the raging epidemic. Deaths occurred so frequently, especially in the killing month of October, that authorities were unable to provide most victims with proper burials. They laid hundreds to rest in unmarked graves in Oakdale, on what is still called Yellow Fever Hill. In December 1867, the directors of Oakdale Cemetery gave a plot of land to the Ladies' Memorial Association for a monument to Confederate soldiers who died or were killed defending Wilmington during the Civil War. 5 years later, the organization dedicated a magnificent granite obelisk, atop which towered a life-size bronze figure of a Southern soldier standing at ease. He watches over 367 unknown comrades whose remains had been exhumed from battlefields and forts from across the lower Cape Fear and reburied in Oakdale. Large cast bronze relief medallions featuring the likenesses of Generals Robert E. Lee and Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson adorn the monument's front and back. The memorial also serves as a tribute to hundreds of other Confederate veterans buried in Oakdale. Some of the more notable include Major General W.H.C. Whiting, commander of the District of the Cape Fear; General William McCrae, brigade commander in the Army of Northern Virginia; George Davis, the Confederacy's last Attorney General; John Newland Maffitt, captain of the Confederate Commerce Raider, Florida; and Alfred Augustine Watson, chaplain in the 2nd North Carolina Infantry. In 1864, the Reverend Watson became rector of St. James Episcopal Church. During the Union occupation of Wilmington, U.S. military authorities seized the church, converting it into an army hospital, when the Reverend Watson refused to pray for President Abraham Lincoln. Rose O'Neal Greenough, celebrated Washington socialite and successful Confederate spy and agent, is also buried in Oakdale. She drowned off the steamship Condor near Fort Fisher in 1864 while attempting to run the Union blockade into Wilmington, after serving as a Confederate diplomat in Europe for 1 year. In 1871, the Oakdale Cemetery Company erected a lodge near the burial grounds entryway along Burnt Mill Creek. It featured a chapel with a 45-foot tower and 12 interior benches. When the wooden structure burned in 1896, the corporation quickly replaced it with an imposing granite and brownstone building that stood for more than half a century. Today, portions of its foundation surround a family plot. Some of the more fascinating and alluring grave markers memorialize vast numbers of people buried beneath them. The innocence of a reposing lamb, the spiritual strength of angels, the dignity of a portrait, the old rugged cross. One simple granite cross, its bar slightly askew and embossed Nancy, marks the final resting place of 24-year-old Nancy Adams Martin, who died of consumption in Cardenas, Cuba, in May 1857. To preserve the body for the long trip back to Wilmington, the sea captain, purportedly Nancy's father, Captain Silas H. Martin, bound it to a cabin chair and immersed it in a cask of rum. Upon returning home, the Martin family buried their beloved daughter as she was, entombed in the wooden barrel. In 1880, Captain William A. Ellerbrock, a tugboat captain on the Cape Fear River, assisted firefighters in battling a raging inferno in downtown Wilmington. when Ellerbrock got knocked down and pinned by a falling timber inside the blazing building, his faithful four-legged companion, a dog named Boss, struggled in vain to pull him to safety. Sadly, both man and his best friend perished side by side. Inseparable in life, Ellerbrock and Boss are now inseparable in death. Family and friends buried them together beneath a grand marble obelisk in Oakdale Cemetery. A number of distinguished people rest in peace in Oakdale. Edward Dudley, North Carolina's first governor elected by popular vote in 1836. Henry Bacon, Jr., architect of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. David Brinkley, a Wilmington native and popular newscaster for NBC and ABC TV. The first mausoleum erected in Oakdale dates to 1892 and contains the earthly remains of the noted Methodist minister, Robert Moran. Nationally recognized architects designed 3 mausoleums in the cemetery. Kenneth Murkison, for his father and namesake in 1898. John Russell Pope, for his father-in-law and railroad magnate Pembroke Jones in 1920. And Carrera and Hastings, for noted Wilmington lawyer Graham Keenan, also in 1920. Some Oakdale stories remain shrouded in mystery. Symbolic markings on the improved Order of Red Men, graves of soldiers killed in battle, and sailors lost at sea. Countless ordinary men, women, and children, many of whom have been lost to their ever more distant relatives, leaving their grave sites to sometimes be neglected. Since its opening in 1855, Oakdale Cemetery's serenity, peacefulness, and beauty have attracted people from all over the world. Generations of families come together to visit, clean, and clear their ancestors' grave sites. Unfortunately, maintenance today is often left to the cemetery's small staff and eager volunteers. Yet residents of Wilmington consider Oakdale a vibrant and treasured part of their community, a place for mourners, but also for historians, genealogists, and naturalists. Oakdale now encompasses more than 90 acres. The most recently opened area, the Live Oak section, includes gate posts from an old abandoned entryway. While the new annexed areas follow a more uniformed grid pattern than the cemetery's original landscape design, they offer additional acreage of picturesque grounds for new burials and regular tours. The undulating panorama is a truly natural and artistic museum of Wilmington's history, and a living testament to the romantic style of cemetery design. Oakdale Cemetery is a place where inspiring works of art made in loving memory of those who have passed on blend together with the beauty of the Old North State's native foliage to create a poignant panorama of the now and then. It is a place where both people and memories rest. It is a place distanced from the past, and yet a place where time seemingly stands still.